Hello YouTube, this is Goddard Radio Moscow here again with another beer review. Now, as was promised in the last video with the Thistle beer, today I'm going to do a Mikkeller one for you, the other Danish Gypsy brewery. So this one is the American Dream, but I believe it's also called the Canadian Dream in Canada. I've seen a few people reviewing it under that name. But as is usual with my beer reviews, I'll just take you through a little bit of a history of the Mikkeller brewery as I usually do. But if you are simply just interested in the tasting of this beer, then feel free just to fast forward towards the last few minutes of the video. This beer individually has quite a bit of an interesting story behind it as well, so I'll take you through that just before we get on to the tasting. But anyway, now the Mikkeller Brewery is a microbrewery or gypsy brewery founded by home brewers Christian Klaurup Keller and Mikkel Borg Bjergso, based in Copenhagen in Denmark. Now Mikkel Bjergso apparently has travelled the world and he's brewed about 200 different types of beer. It's probably a lot more than that now, but his first exposure to foreign beer was a job that he had in a cafe while he was studying to become a teacher. As I mentioned in the Thistle video, the people who founded Thistle were students of Bjergso's. But when he was qualified as a teacher, he used to stop at a pub on his way home for a beer. He must have had some awful classes. But he tried the IPA from the Danish brewery Brokehouse, and it was then that he decided that he would save himself a hell of a lot of money if he actually brewed the beer for himself. But Mikkel and Christian drew some inspiration from some American brewing books that they'd found, and they started brewing in their kitchens at home. And they presented one of their clone beers to their beer club, which won in a blind tasting contest that they had. And then this got them hooked on the idea of brewing their own beer. But their kitchen experiments lasted 2.5 years before the pair began brewing beer on the larger scale at the Danish microbrewery Orbeck. Now Mikkel's brother Jeppe opened up a beer shop in Copenhagen in 2005, and it was from there that they distributed the very early Mikkeller brews. But the big breakthrough for them in the international beer world came when they had the idea of adding French press coffee to an oatmeal stout, and this resulted in the Beer Geek breakfast beer, and this was actually voted the #1 stout on the international beer forum ratebeer.com. You'll probably have heard of that. But this kick-started Mikkeller's international success, and after attending the Danish Beer Festival in 2006, the brewery were courted by an American distribution company called Shelton Brothers, and this has substantially helped their growth in recent years. But Christian Keller parted ways with the company in 2007 despite this success, but this was because he didn't want to produce more than a handful of beers, and so he took up a career as an editor of the Danish music magazine Sound Venue. And this is one of the key things with Mikkeller actually. As far as I'm aware, they don't have the same kind of idea that Brewdog have with the core range, if you like. They seem to just brew a whole load of different beers all the time. But the brewery, with it being a gypsy brewery, the brewery doesn't have its own brewery, so to speak. So obviously you can't go and get tours and things like that. But they brew at a variety of different host facilities, and this includes brewing in Denmark, Norway, Belgium, the UK, and they also brew in the USA as well. But their home base as such is the Mikkeller bar in Copenhagen, and they have a second bar in Copenhagen as well called Mikkeller and Friends, which, as I mentioned in the last video, is a collaboration bar with Thistle. And they very recently opened up a bar in San Francisco a few years ago, and this is the first location outside of Denmark, and I believe they're actually looking at expanding this to other places as well. But today Mikkeller export to over 40 different countries, and they've actually brewed over 600 varieties of beer encompassing a massive array of flavours and ingredients. Like with many craft breweries, they're very experimental and like to try a lot of different things. The most recent one I've seen that they're doing is the beers that they're pairing with different types of foods and stuff like that. It's said that the brewery, as I said, the brewery drew inspiration from the American craft brewing industry, and the whole aim of the company, basically, as it says on their website, is to make beer an alternative to champagne and things like that for drinking with gourmet foods. But the company also collaborate with brewers, as I mentioned, such as Brewdog, Nonju from Norway, Three Floyds from America, and Thistle in Denmark. The first Thistle beer, incidentally, was a collaboration between Mikkeller and Thistle. But the brewery has a blog on the website, so I'll put the link for that in the description, and this lets you keep up to date with the current events, new releases and things like that. But most recently, the most recent development on that beer, incidentally, is to do with the labels. They signed up Keith Shore, who was a visiting artist for their labels from Philadelphia, as their permanent art director. And another interesting point with Mikkeller is that Mikkel's brother Jeppe Bjergso, who I mentioned earlier, had the beer shop. He's involved with Evil Twin Brewing, who are also a really good craft brewery. I have one of their beers at home that I'll review for you at a later date. But anyway, let's just get on to this beer itself now. I'll just let you have a little look at the bottle and cap on this one. As you can see there, it's got quite a sort of old school style label on this one. I'm not sure exactly who it is that's on the label of this one. I'm not sure if that's meant to be Mikkel Bjergso actually. I've seen pictures of them and it looks a little bit like them, but I'm probably saying that and it's wrong. As you can see, as usual with Mikkeller, they don't have a specialised bottle cap. I wish they would do that actually. It'd be quite cool to see them do that themselves, but there's nothing really on the back of this one. But this one is described as a premium lager. It's a 4.6% beer. For those of you watching outside the UK, this is the standard 330ml bottle that you get here. But I'll just tell you the story behind this beer as well. This was part of a research project started by Mikkeller, and they used 4 different highly educated beer tasters to monitor how the taste of this beer changed over time. And apparently they would taste a bottle of the beer weekly over a period of 126 days, and the beer was put in the fridge on the Sunday and tasted on the Monday at the same time, basically to keep all the parameters the same for the different tasters. But this allowed them, basically, they had a rigid cooling down period and drinking period as well. That this was just, as I say, to keep the parameters of the test the same. But the tasting panel came up with some rigid ground rules before doing this study. The tasters had to identify 4 aromas, 4 different tastes and 4 others, and this gave 12 variables, which had been, in this particular taste test apparently was derived by Dirk Nauditz from the De Proef Brewery, where a lot of the Mikkeller beers are brewed. And the whole idea of this project simply was to help educate the drinker about the beer tastes and improve their brewing process. This was a similar idea to what they did with the single hop series and the yeast series. But as I mentioned, this is a 4.6% lager. We'll get on to the tasting of this now. It's also known as the Canadian Dream in Canada as well. So let's get this guy out and get on with the tasting there. Where's my bottle cap opener? There we are. Okay, there we are, sorted. I got this one again from Thistle News the other day, so a shout out to those guys there again. You'll find the link, the Facebook page for them in the description of the video, so be sure to check them out if you're watching from the Aberdeen area in Scotland, where I'm based at the moment. Let's get the rest of this out. As you can see, it's a it's a very, very bright, sort of hazy orangey colour, that one. It's quite clear as well. It is fairly transparent, but it is hazy at the same time. There's a lot of bubbles in this one. There's quite a few big bubbles kind of going up towards the head there. As you can see, the head is about a finger. It's quite foamy. Big bubbles in there as well. In terms of the aroma, you're getting quite a hoppy aroma coming out there first. There's a good mix between citrus and grapefruit in that, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, a lot of fruitiness in there. There is some kind of caramel lingering underneath that with some sort of nutty element to it. Maybe caramel, brown sugar. It might be honey. I'm not quite sure, but it's brown sugar of some kind of description. But yeah, there's some woody. There's a lot of woody and piney notes in there too. It actually smells a lot like a pale ale, but I think there might be some sort of breadiness in there as well. But it doesn't smell exactly like a lager. It smells more like a pale ale, to be honest. But let's give this guy a wee taste and see what it's like. Very, very hoppy, this one. Really hoppy. It's quite crisp up front actually. It's got a nice wettish mouthfeel to it. But the fruity hops are coming in at the start. I think it's mainly the grapefruit that's coming out with just a hint of citrus, but the pine resin is giving it quite a lingering bitterness throughout, and the hops as well mixing together. That's the sort of flavour coming throughout this one. But yeah, as usual, the flavour's kind of coming in quite hoppy to start. It's dropping off, and then the hoppiness is coming back into it on the aftertaste with a sort of tropical fruit notes in that. And I'm getting that the citrus is there as well. There's a good mix between the sort of citrus and the tropical fruits of this one, and the piney resin obviously is there as well. I'm trying to get a bit better in the middle of this one, see what it's like. Yeah, in the middle there is perhaps an element of breadiness in there with the caramel, or maybe biscuity malts. I'm not quite sure. There is, the malt character is coming out in the middle more. I feel like I've been saying that a lot with my videos recently, but it's the same thing. It's the same character again. This beer actually does have a character that's a bit more reminiscent of an IPA than a lager. But yeah, that bread, that sort of bready, biscuity, malty character is coming out in the middle, and the caramel, there is a hint of the caramel in there as well. But there's a lingering bitterness throughout this beer, and that bitterness even is coming in a little bit in the middle, but it comes in stronger at the start, drops off, and then it comes back to a sort of mid-level, sort of for the aftertaste of this one. The aftertaste is definitely the sort of citrusy and piney resins there. That's the thing that's sticking with this beer. But anyway, as in terms of the mouth, I would describe this one as a light to mid-bodied. It's a very, very sessionable beer actually, but it's very, very hoppy. I mean, for a sessionable beer, I tend to prefer things that are a bit more fruity. The piney, the hops on this one are really quite prominent actually. But I prefer the fruitiness to be a bit more up on it. But this is a nice beer anyway. In terms of the mouth, yeah, light to mid-bodied. It's very, very drinkable. The carbonation on it is a bit more active in the front of the beer, but you've got a dry bitterness that stays with it throughout, just from the sort of sheer hoppiness of this one. As I say, it's quite a sessionable beer. I would say this one definitely has a bit more of a pale ale character to it than a lager, to be honest. I'm quite surprised that it's described as a premium lager. But that's how they're describing it on their website. I'm quite surprised at that. But yeah, definitely, to me it seems more like a pale ale. But anyway, it's a very, very nice beer. I highly recommend you give it a try. It's as with anything with Mikkeller, you're not going to be disappointed. Mikkeller are a really, really good brewery. They don't have their reputation for nothing, you know. But I hope this beer review has been informative. I'm going to go away and watch and enjoy the rest of this now. But please let me know in the comment section if you've tried this yourself. And it's always interesting to hear that sort of thing. But thanks for your support, your continuing support of my channel. Please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. But you've been watching Goddard Radio Moscow. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I'll catch you tomorrow. I think I'm going to go for an English beer tomorrow, but I'll catch you soon. Cheers.